My name is Samantha Wilson, 32 years old, and I still remember the exact moment my world imploded. Family dinner, crystal glasses clinking when Dad announced, "We've decided Amber will inherit everything, the business, the house, the accounts." Mom nodded, adding the knife twist, "Your sister deserves it." 20 years of my sweat built that company. 20 years while Amber breezed through life. Their eyes avoided mine as my throat closed. Something inside me finally broke that night. No more dutiful daughter. They chose their favorite. Now I'd choose myself. Before I dive into what happened next, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, what I did next might just inspire you. The favoritism started early in our childhood home in Connecticut. My earliest memory is from my 6th birthday party. My parents had promised me a special celebration at the local roller skating rink. The morning of my birthday, Amber, then 8, decided she wanted to go horseback riding instead. Without hesitation, my parents canceled my party and drove us 2 hours to a ranch. I spent my birthday watching Amber ride horses while I sat alone on a bench with my untouched cake. Our family business, Wilson Medical Supply, was started by my grandfather and built into a regional success by my father. From the age of 14, I would go there after school learning inventory management and customer service. By 16, I was working weekends and summers learning every aspect of the operation. Meanwhile, Amber breezed through high school, focused on cheerleading and socializing. When college applications came around, I received an acceptance letter from Cornell's business program. My parents convinced me to defer for just a year to help with the company expansion. That year turned into 5 as I took on increasing responsibilities. I eventually finished my degree at night through the local state university. Amber, however, attended Dartmouth with full parental support, changing majors 3 times before graduating with a liberal arts degree she never used. After college, Amber launched a series of failed ventures, a boutique that closed in 6 months, a lifestyle blog that never gained traction, and a short-lived career as a real estate agent. Each failure was met with understanding and additional financial support. "She's finding herself," my mother would say. "She's so creative," my father would add. Meanwhile, I developed a new inventory system that saved the company 30% in carrying costs. My father presented it at an industry conference as his own innovation. When I confronted him privately, he said, "It's a family business, Sam. There's no room for individual credit." Yet, when Amber suggested we change our logo, an idea that cost thousands to implement with no measurable benefit, she received lavish praise and a bonus. Last year, I spent 3 months working nights and weekends to save our relationship with Medcore, our largest client. They were unhappy with shipping delays and considering another supplier. I redesigned our entire fulfillment process, personally called their procurement team weekly, and even drove deliveries myself when necessary. When the contract was renewed, Amber, who had recently joined the company as Director of Client Relations, a position created for her, took the lead in the celebration dinner with Medcore executives. My parents beamed with pride as she accepted congratulations. 3 times, I tried to discuss the imbalance with my parents. The first time in my teens, my mother said I was being competitive and should support my sister. The second time after the Medcore incident, my father told me I needed to be more visible if I wanted recognition. The third time, just a month before the fateful dinner, my mother actually said, "You know Amber needs more encouragement than you do. You've always been the strong one." Being the strong one meant watching Amber receive a company car on her first day while I drove the same Honda for 10 years. It meant Amber getting an office next to my father's while I worked from a converted supply room. It meant Amber receiving credit for my ideas, my work, and my sacrifices. The day before the dinner, I overheard Amber telling our accountant that Sam is great with details, but I have the vision for this company's future. I had just finished a 5-year strategic plan that would expand our business into 3 new states. A plan Amber had not contributed to in any way. When the accountant spotted me, his face flushed with embarrassment. He knew the truth. 20 years of being overlooked had built a mountain of resentment inside me. But somehow, I always convinced myself that eventually my contributions would be recognized, that one day merit would matter more than my mother's inexplicable preference for her firstborn. The dinner invitation had actually given me hope. Dad had been talking about succession planning. I thought perhaps they were finally going to acknowledge my dedication. Instead, they gave her everything and told me she deserved it. I drove home from my parents' house that night in a state of shock. The windshield blurred with tears I refused to let fall. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as my parents' words echoed in my mind. "Your sister deserves it." 4 words that invalidated 20 years of my life. I couldn't stop remembering the time I was 17 after I'd worked 60 hours during spring break to help with inventory, while Amber was on a trip to Cancun with friends. I'd finally gathered the courage to ask my father why Amber never had to help at the business. He had looked at me with genuine confusion. "Your sister isn't cut out for this kind of work, Sam. You are. You should take it as a compliment." As I pulled into my driveway, my phone lit up with calls. First, my cousin Rachel. I let it go to voicemail. Then Brian, my partner of 3 years. Finally, as I unlocked my front door, Aunt Patricia, I silenced the phone and sank onto my couch in the dark. Rachel's message came first. "Sam, I was in the kitchen helping Mom with dessert when they told you." I couldn't believe it. "Call me when you're ready to talk." That wasn't right what they did. Brian's was next. "Hey babe, just checking in. You seemed upset when you texted that you were heading home early. Everything okay with your family? Call me." Brian was supportive but never fully understood the dynamic with my family. When I would tell him stories about Amber getting preferential treatment, he would suggest I was being oversensitive or that siblings naturally compete for attention. "Your parents love you both," he would say, "just in different ways." Tonight, I couldn't bear his well-meaning but dismissive comfort. Around midnight, Aunt Patricia's message arrived. "Samantha, I just heard what happened. I'm appalled. Your grandfather would be turning in his grave. This isn't what he intended for the company. Call me tomorrow." Sleep was impossible. I paced my living room until dawn, replaying every sacrifice I'd made for the family and the business. College scholarships, I'd declined to stay local. The relationship with David that ended because I couldn't relocate for his job. The promotions at other companies I'd turned down out of loyalty. All while Amber flitted from interest to interest, relationship to relationship, failure to failure, always with the safety net of parental approval and financial support. By morning, I had 8 missed calls. 2 from my mother, 1 from my father, 3 more from Rachel, 1 from Brian, and another from Aunt Patricia. I listened to my mother's voicemail first. "Samantha, your behavior last night was very disappointing. Walking out during dessert was childish. Your father and I made a business decision based on what's best for the company's future. Amber has the leadership qualities needed. You're wonderful with operations, honey, and there will always be a place for you there. Call me when you've calmed down." The gaslighting was breathtaking. 20 years of dedication reduced to wonderful with operations. And the expectation that I would continue working at the company under my less qualified sister's leadership as if nothing had happened. My father's text was even worse. "Sam, I expect you at the office tomorrow. We'll pretend last night didn't happen. Be mature about this. The decision is made. Be mature. Accept being robbed of my rightful place. Keep contributing without recognition." The audacity was staggering. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about inheritance or a title. This was about decades of being used for my skills while being denied proper acknowledgement. Of watching Amber fail upward while I remained stuck in place despite my success. Of being expected to smile and accept it all because family. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a thought that had always seemed disloyal before. My parents were never going to change. They would always favor Amber. And if I wanted justice, I would have to fight for it myself. I texted Brian that I needed some space, called in sick to work, and then dialed the one person I knew would understand exactly what I needed to do next. Jessica, it's Sam. I need your help with something. Can you come over and bring any information you have about family business law? Jessica arrived at my apartment an hour later with a leather portfolio and a determined expression. As my oldest friend and a successful business attorney, she was exactly who I needed in my corner. She listened without interruption as I recounted the previous night's events and the years of favoritism that preceded them. "I'm not even surprised," she said when I finished. "I've watched this dynamic play out since we were kids. But Sam, there's something you should know about Wilson Medical Supply." Jessica opened her portfolio and pulled out several documents. "My firm represented Medline when they were considering acquiring your family's company 2 years ago. The deal fell through, but during due diligence, we found some concerning practices." She spread the papers across my coffee table. "Your sister has been on the payroll at an executive salary since she was in college. Even during those years, she was supposedly finding herself with her failed businesses. There are also several consulting companies receiving substantial monthly payments that appear to be shells. One is registered to Amber's address." My stomach dropped. "Are you saying she's been stealing from the company?" "Not exactly stealing if your parents approved it, but it's certainly questionable financial management and potentially tax evasion." Jessica continued. "What's interesting is that on all the legal documentation for the business, you're listed as a 25% owner. This was news to me. That's impossible. I've never received any distributions." "That's my point. According to these records, you should have been receiving quarterly distributions for years. Based on the company's reported profits, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." My mind reeled with this information. All those years of barely making ends meet on my modest salary, watching Amber drive new luxury cars and take exotic vacations, I should have been receiving significant income from my ownership stake. "There's more," Jessica said. "The company's succession plan that was filed with the corporate documents specifies that leadership would transition to the Wilson child actively working in daily operations for a minimum of 5 years. That's you, Sam, not Amber." We spent the next several hours outlining a strategy. First, I needed to secure copies of all relevant company documents before anyone realized what I was doing. Second, I needed to understand exactly how much money had been diverted over the years. Third, I needed allies within the company who could corroborate my version of events. The following day, I used my keys to enter the office early before anyone else arrived. I downloaded financial records, board minutes, and incorporation documents onto a flash drive. I was in the process of accessing the email server when I received an alert on my phone, a system notification that my company account credentials had been revoked. I quickly finished my download and left before anyone arrived. Back home, Jessica and her colleague Thomas reviewed the documents. "They've been planning this for months," Thomas said, pointing to a series of transactions. "Look at how they've been restructuring the company holdings. They've been systematically removing your name from accounts and creating new corporate entities that exclude you." "But why would they even put my name on anything in the first place if they always intended to give everything to Amber?" I asked. "Tax benefits," Jessica explained. "By distributing ownership on paper, they reduced their tax burden. They probably never expected you to find out or challenge them." Just then, my phone pinged with an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should know what she's planning." It was from Linda, an accountant at the company who had always been friendly to me. Amber called an emergency staff meeting after you left yesterday, the email read. She announced she'll be taking over as CEO effective immediately and hinted at significant restructuring. Several longtime employees are concerned, especially after she brought in consultants from her boyfriend's firm this morning. They're reviewing everyone's positions. Thought you should know. I forwarded the email to Jessica and Thomas. They're moving faster than we anticipated, Jessica said. We need to accelerate our timeline. I converted my spare bedroom into an investigation headquarters. On one wall, I created a timeline of company events. On another, I mapped the financial transactions Jessica had identified. On the third, I listed potential allies and their positions within the company. Thomas helped me draft legal letters asserting my ownership rights and demanding an immediate halt to any restructuring without my approval. Jessica began preparing for potential litigation. For the first time since that devastating dinner, I felt a sense of control returning. I had been blindsided by my parents' announcement, but I wouldn't be blindsided by what came next. Amber might have their support, but I had something more valuable, the truth and a determination to see justice done. They've underestimated you your entire life, Jessica said as she reviewed our strategy. That's their biggest mistake, and it's about to become their most costly one. 3 days into my investigation, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw my Uncle Robert shifting uncomfortably on my porch. My father's younger brother had always been the family peacemaker, often mediating disputes at holiday gatherings. "Sam, can I come in?" he asked when I opened the door. "I think you should know what's happening." Over coffee at my kitchen table, Uncle Robert revealed that Amber had called an impromptu family council the previous evening, one I conveniently hadn't been invited to. Present were my parents, Amber Aunt Patricia, who looked uncomfortable throughout, according to Uncle Robert, and several cousins. Amber told everyone you had a breakdown after the dinner announcement. Uncle Robert said, his voice low. She claimed you've been embezzling from the company for years, and that's why your parents couldn't trust you with leadership. She said they have proof and are considering pressing charges, but haven't because family comes first. My coffee mug hit the table with a thud. That's absurd. She's the one who's been taking money improperly. I figured it was something like that, Uncle Robert nodded. The timing seemed too convenient. But Sam, most of the family believed her. She had documents probably falsified based on what you're telling me. Your cousin Tyler is already posting on Facebook about how disappointed he is in you. I pulled out my phone to see multiple social media notifications. Sure enough, extended family members were posting vague messages about family betrayal, and the truth always comes out. My cousin Melissa, who I'd been close with since childhood, had unfriended me entirely. There's more, Uncle Robert continued reluctantly. Amber claimed you've been spreading rumors that your parents played favorites. She got quite emotional about how you've always been jealous of her, and how it's escalated recently. Your mother cried throughout the entire meeting. Of course she cried. My mother's tears had always been a powerful weapon in family conflict. I'd learned early that no matter the actual circumstances, my mother's tears would immediately cast me as the villain. That evening, I drove to my parents' house, determined to confront them directly. They seemed unsurprised to see me, as if they'd been expecting my visit. "How could you let Amber spread those lies?" I demanded, once we were seated in the living room. The same room where countless Christmases and birthdays had been celebrated. The same room where I'd always received less than my sister. "Amber is protecting the company," my father replied calmly. "You've become unstable, Samantha. We're concerned about you." Unstable. I've been the backbone of that company for 20 years. I'm the only reason we still have the Medcore account. I developed the inventory system that saved us from bankruptcy during the recession. My mother shook her head sadly. "You see, this is exactly what we mean. You've always been jealous of your sister, always competing for attention. The gaslighting was so blatant, it left me momentarily speechless. They were rewriting history before my eyes. I've seen the financial records, I finally said. I know about Amber's executive salary while she was still in college. I know about the shell companies. I know about my 25% ownership stake that you've hidden from me. My father's face darkened. You had no right to access those records. If you're talking about taking legal action, you should know that would have serious consequences for this family. Are you threatening me? I asked, incredulous. I'm stating facts. No judge in this county will rule against us. We have relationships going back decades. And do you really want to be the person who sues their own parents, who destroys their family's reputation? As we argued, I noticed my mother had slipped out of the room. She returned with my father's old tennis partner, who I was shocked to discover was now their lawyer. Samantha Howard is here to discuss a cease and desist regarding your unauthorized access of company records, my father explained. I stood up suddenly, understanding this had been a setup. They had invited Howard over anticipating my visit. They had prepared for this confrontation. I think we're done here, I said, moving toward the door. One more thing, my father called after me. We've changed the locks on the house, and we expect you to return your key to the office tomorrow. Amber will be supervising the collection of your personal items. My mother added the final twist of the knife. You've always been jealous of your sister. We just never thought you'd take it this far. As I reached my car, I saw movement in my parents' garage. Two large men were loading boxes into a van. I recognized my childhood trophies and keepsakes among the items. They were literally removing every trace of me from their home. The next morning, those same boxes appeared on my porch. Everything from my childhood bedroom, my high school yearbooks, even the photo albums I'd made. A note was taped to the top box in my mother's handwriting. We thought you might want these. Please don't contact us again until you're ready to apologize. Inside one box, I found the business award I'd received at 16 for the marketing plan that had brought in 3 major hospital clients. The plaque had been broken in half. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was being erased from the family narrative. Amber was the only daughter now, and I was the villain in their story. After being effectively excommunicated from my family, I knew I needed more allies and stronger evidence. Jessica's legal strategy was sound, but we needed insider information about Amber's current activities at the company. My first call was to William Foster, the company's CFO. William had been with Wilson Medical Supply for 15 years, hired directly by my father. While always professionally cordial to Amber, he had often sought my input on financial decisions over hers, clearly recognizing who had the actual business acumen. I've been waiting for your call, William said when we met at a coffee shop far from the office. Things are worse than you probably realize. William slid a USB drive across the table. Financial records from the past 3 years. Amber has been systematically redirecting company resources to her personal projects. There's a particularly concerning pattern with a consulting firm called AJP Innovations. Her boyfriend's initials I noted. Adam James Peterson. Exactly. AJP has received over $350 0 inches the past year for strategic consulting. No deliverables, no reports, nothing tangible. Why didn't you flag this before? William looked down. Your father approved every payment. When I questioned one particularly large invoice, he told me to stay in my lane. I have a family to support Sam. I couldn't risk my job. But you're risking it now, I observed. Because what's happening isn't just unethical, it's potentially illegal. And after watching you build this company alongside your father for 20 years, seeing you pushed out this way, he shook his head. It isn't right. My next ally came unexpectedly. Aunt Patricia called and asked to meet me at her home. My mother's older sister had always been somewhat distant from our immediate family, attending major events, but rarely getting involved in day-to-day matters. "I need to tell you something about your grandfather's intentions for the company," she said as we sat in her sunroom. "Something your parents have conveniently forgotten." Aunt Patricia retrieved a yellowed envelope from a locked drawer in her desk. "Your grandfather gave this to me before he passed. He asked me to share it if I ever felt the company was headed in the wrong direction." Inside was a letter written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. It outlined his vision for Wilson Medical Supply, emphasizing the importance of merit-based leadership succession and explicitly stating his hope that the company would go to the grandchild who demonstrated the strongest work ethic and business sense regardless of birth order or gender. He knew I whispered reading the letter a second time. "He saw how your mother favored Amber even when you were small children," Aunt Patricia confirmed. "He worried about it. That's why he structured his will the way he did, leaving the company equally to your father and your uncle. He hoped the shared ownership would prevent exactly what's happening now. But Uncle Robert doesn't have any involvement in the company," I pointed out. "That's because he sold his shares to your father when he started his own business. A decision I believe he now regrets. But the point is, your grandfather never intended for favorites to be played. He valued meritocracy above all else." Armed with this new perspective on family history, I turned my attention to the company's client relationships. Amber had never bothered to build connections with our customers, considering it beneath her. This gave me an opening. Through discreet inquiries, I discovered that SurgTech, our second largest client, was deeply unhappy with recent changes to their account management. Amber had removed their longtime account manager and reassigned them to a new hire who happened to be her former sorority sister, with zero medical supply experience. I arranged to meet SurgTech's purchasing director for lunch, ostensibly to catch up as old colleagues. He didn't mince words. "We're preparing to take our business elsewhere," he told me. The new account manager couldn't answer basic questions about our order forecasting system, the system you designed specifically for us. When we escalated our concerns, we received a dismissive email from Amber suggesting we were being resistant to fresh perspectives. "What would it take to keep your business with Wilson?" I asked. "Honestly, your return. You understand our needs. You built our customized ordering platform. Without you, they're advocating for us. We don't see a future with Wilson Medical Supply." Similar conversations with other key clients revealed a pattern. Amber was systematically damaging client relationships that I had spent years building either through neglect or by inserting unqualified friends into critical positions. Meanwhile, Jessica had been cultivating relationships with several company employees who remained loyal to me. Administrative assistant Carol began forwarding me copies of concerning internal memos. Warehouse manager Doug reported that inventory accuracy had plummeted since I'd left. IT specialist Ryan provided remote access to company systems that allowed us to monitor concerning developments in real time. As our network of allies grew, so did the evidence against Amber's leadership. Then came a disturbing escalation. After a late meeting with Jessica, I returned home to find a note tucked under my windshield wiper. In crude cutout letters, it read, "Stop digging or you'll regret it." The childish format couldn't mask the adult threat behind it. The next day, I installed security cameras around my apartment. I began varying my driving routes. I stopped meeting informants in person, instead developing a secure communication system with Jessica's help. These precautions proved prescient when William called late one night. "Amber knows something's happening," he warned. "She's been asking IT to audit system access logs. She specifically asked about your old login credentials. Be careful, Sam. This is getting dangerous." As if to emphasize his point, my phone pinged with a notification from my new security system Motion, detected at my front door. On the camera feed, I watched a hooded figure testing my doorknob, then quickly retreating when a neighbor appeared in the hallway. I couldn't prove it was Amber or someone she'd sent, but the timing was too convenient to be coincidence. The battle for Wilson Medical Supply was no longer just about business. It had become personal, potentially dangerous, and there was no turning back. A week after the security camera incident, Amber launched her counterattack. First came the company-wide email announcing a strategic reorganization to streamline operations and enhance competitiveness. The restructuring eliminated the positions of 3 longtime employees who had been providing me with information, including Carol, from administration. William called me immediately after the announcement. "This is just the beginning," he warned. "I overheard Amber telling your father they need to clean house of anyone loyal to you." My name was on her list. 2 days later, a press release appeared on the company website announcing the acceleration of our leadership transition plan. The release stated that Amber Wilson had been unanimously appointed CEO by the board of directors effective immediately. My father would transition to chairman of the board, maintaining oversight, but stepping back from daily operations. The speed of these changes was alarming. My parents had originally talked about a gradual transition over 6 to 12 months. Amber was clearly rushing to consolidate power before we could mount an effective challenge. I forwarded the press release to Jessica. "She's moving faster than we anticipated," I texted. "We need to accelerate our timeline too." That evening, I returned home from a strategy meeting with Jessica to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Cold fear washed over me as I backed away and called the police. When they arrived and cleared the apartment, the extent of the violation became clear. My home had been thoroughly ransacked, drawers emptied, furniture upended, even air vents removed from the walls. Most significantly, my laptop was missing, along with the external hard drive where I'd been backing up evidence. The police officer took notes dispassionately. "Looks like a standard burglary," he concluded. "Any idea what they were looking for? Cash, jewelry?" I knew exactly what they were looking for, but I simply shook my head. "I'll provide a list of missing items." After the police left, I called Jessica in a panic. They took everything. All our documentation. Not everything, Jessica reassured me. "Remember, I have copies of all the critical files. And after your security camera picked up that person at your door last week, we started using the encrypted cloud storage. The most damaging evidence against Amber is safe." Nevertheless, the break-in had rattled me deeply. I checked into a hotel that night, unwilling to stay in my violated home. Around midnight, my phone rang with a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Having trouble sleeping in your new accommodations?" Amber's voice was unmistakable, tinged with malicious pleasure. "This can all go away, Sammy. Just sign the settlement agreement Dad's lawyer sent over. Take the pitiful sum they're offering. Disappear. Because if you don't..." She paused dramatically. "Well, breaking into an apartment is just the beginning of what I can do." "You're admitting to criminal activity," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I fumbled to activate the call recording app Jessica had insisted I install. Amber laughed. "Prove it. No one will believe you over me. Not the family, not the employees, not even the police in this town. Dad's been golfing with the chief for 20 years. After hanging up, I forwarded the recording to Jessica and tried unsuccessfully to sleep. The next morning brought more evidence of Amber's escalation. My car parked in the hotel lot had been vandalized, all 4 tires slashed and leaves scratched into the pane of the driver's door. When I called Brian to ask for a ride expecting sympathy, I received another shock. "I can't get involved in this, Sam," he said, his voice strained. "Amber came to see me yesterday." "Amber came to see you. Why?" His hesitation told me everything before he spoke. "She offered me money to convince you to drop everything. A lot of money, Sam. And when I refused, she threatened to ruin my business. She knows people on the zoning board. said she could make sure my restaurant expansion never gets approved. And you believed her. I don't know what to believe anymore. All I know is that this situation is getting dangerous, and I think you should consider taking whatever settlement they're offering. This isn't worth your safety or mine. I hung up without responding, another relationship casualty of this war I never asked for. The stress began taking a physical toll. I developed insomnia, lost weight, and started experiencing panic attacks, something I'd never dealt with before. During a particularly severe episode, gasping for breath in my hotel bathroom at 3 a.m., I seriously considered giving up. Maybe Brian was right. Maybe I should take whatever crumbs my parents were offering and try to rebuild my life elsewhere. But then I remembered my grandfather's letter. I thought about William Carroll and others who had risked their livelihoods to help me. I recalled 20 years of giving everything to a company that was supposed to have been partly mine all along. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, about truth, about refusing to be erased. The next morning, still exhausted but newly resolved, I met with Jessica to implement the contingency plan we'd developed but hoped not to need. It's time, I told her. Amber has shown she's willing to break the law. We need to go nuclear before someone gets seriously hurt. Jessica nodded gravely. I'll file the emergency injunction today. Are you sure you're ready for this? Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. Your relationship with your parents may never recover. I thought about my mother's tears at the family gathering designed to cast me as the villain. My father's threats and dismissal of my contributions. 20 years of watching Amber receive credit for my work. What relationship? I asked bitterly. They made their choice at that dinner. Now I'm making mine. With Amber's escalating attacks making clear that time was running out, Jessica and I implemented our comprehensive counter-strategy. We had anticipated Amber might try to erase evidence, which is why we'd created redundant backups of everything. While the break-in at my apartment had been traumatic, it ultimately gained Amber nothing while giving us proof of her desperation. Our first move was legal. Jessica filed for an emergency injunction to prevent any further structural changes to Wilson Medical Supply until ownership disputes could be resolved. The filing included affidavits from William and other long-term employees testifying to my central role in the company's success and Amber's pattern of mismanagement. Simultaneously, I began meeting individually with members of the company's board of directors. While my father controlled the majority of board seats, several independent members had been appointed over the years to satisfy requirements from larger clients who wanted assurance of proper governance. My first meeting was with Gregory Hutchins, a retired healthcare executive who had joined our board 3 years earlier. We met at his country club where he listened intently as I presented documentation of Amber's financial improprieties. I've had concerns about her leadership style, Gregory admitted after reviewing the evidence. During her presentation at the last board meeting, she couldn't answer basic questions about cash flow projections. Your father jumped in to cover for her repeatedly. Did you vote for her appointment as CEO? I asked. Gregory looked uncomfortable. The vote was presented as a formality. Your father indicated the family was unified in this decision. Clearly we weren't, I replied, showing him the ownership documents that listed me as a 25% stakeholder who had never been consulted. By the end of our conversation, Gregory agreed to request a special board meeting to review Amber's appointment process and recent financial decisions. My meetings with other board members yielded similar results. While none committed explicitly to supporting me, all expressed concern about the governance issues I'd raised. More importantly, they began asking questions. Amber couldn't answer questions about operations, client relationships, and financial details that had always been my domain. Meanwhile, Jessica initiated another critical component of our strategy: She helped me file an anonymous whistleblower complaint with the state's Business Regulatory Agency detailing potential tax fraud and misappropriation of company funds. The complaint was carefully constructed to focus on specific violations rather than the broader family dispute. This puts the company under official scrutiny, Jessica explained. Even if your parents try to settle the ownership dispute privately, they can't make a regulatory investigation disappear. Our third strategic move involved media pressure. Through industry contacts, I arranged a meeting with Diana Reynolds, an investigative journalist known for her coverage of family business disputes. While I didn't share all our evidence, I provided enough documentation to pique her interest in the story of a daughter who helped build a multi-million-dollar company only to be pushed out in favor of a less qualified sibling. This isn't just a family squabble, Diana noted as she reviewed the materials. It's a case study in gender dynamics and corporate governance. Even with your 25% ownership, you were expected to accept less leadership opportunity than your sister, who contributed significantly less. That's a story worth telling. Diana's research would take time, but even her preliminary inquiries sent ripples through the local business community. Several of my parents' friends called them asking about the situation, creating social pressure they hadn't anticipated. Our most significant breakthrough came through an unexpected source. Michael Chen, an IT specialist I'd hired 3 years earlier, reached out through our secure communication channel. After you left, Amber directed IT to delete all your old emails and files from the server, he informed me. She said it was to clean up digital storage, but it seemed suspicious. I created backups before executing her order. Michael provided access to these backups, which contained years of emails between my parents and Amber. Among them, we discovered messages outlining their plan to gradually diminish my role while elevating Amber's. One particularly damning email, from my father to Amber, read, "Once the MedCorp contract is secured, thanks to Sam's work, we'll announce your promotion. Sam will be upset initially, but she's always been the dutiful daughter. She'll accept it eventually." The email was dated 8 months before the fateful family dinner, proving the decision had been made long before it was announced to me. Even more shocking was an email chain between Amber and Adam discussing the consulting work his firm was supposedly doing for Wilson Medical. "Just submitted another invoice for $50 Kelvins," he wrote. "What services should I list this time?" Last month's strategic planning description worked well. Amber's response: "Dad never reads the details anyway. We'll use the money for the Bali trip. Just make sure Sam never sees these invoices." She actually checks the documentation. This evidence of deliberate financial misconduct was exactly what we needed. Jessica immediately incorporated it into our legal filings and shared it with the regulatory agency. Our final strategic move involved the company's clients. I'd maintained relationships with key decision-makers at our largest accounts throughout my career. Now, I carefully reached out to them not to disparage Amber, but to inform them of my new consulting venture, specializing in medical supply chain optimization. The implication was clear: I might no longer be with Wilson Medical Supply, but my expertise remained available to them. Within days, 3 major clients had signed consulting agreements with me, creating both legitimacy for my new business and financial security. As the legal battle unfolded, Amber, meanwhile, seemed increasingly unaware of the net closing around her. According to William, she'd been focused on cosmetic changes to the company, redesigning the logo again, redecorating the executive offices, and planning a lavish client appreciation event at an exclusive resort. When the regulatory agency's formal investigation notice arrived at the company, offices followed shortly by our legal filings, and the request for a special board meeting, the carefully constructed facade began to crumble. My parents called in a panic. I let their calls go to voicemail, listening later, as their tone evolved from commanding to concerned, to nearly pleading as they realized the extent of our counteroffensive. "Samantha, this has gone far enough." My father's final message stated, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Perhaps we can discuss a compromise. Call me back." It was the first time in my adult life I'd heard my father suggest compromise, rather than simply expecting compliance. The power dynamic had shifted, and we all knew it. "They'll try to settle now," Jessica predicted when I played her the message. "They'll offer you money to go away quietly. Maybe even a larger ownership percentage, with no actual control." "That's not enough anymore," I replied. "This isn't just about my share of the company. It's about accountability." 2 days later, the board secretary issued notice of an emergency meeting to address urgent governance concerns. The battle for Wilson Medical Supply was coming to a head, and for the first time, I felt confident in my position. Amber had thrown everything she had at me: intimidation, theft, vandalism, and social isolation. She'd tried to erase me from the company narrative. Instead, she'd only made me more determined to write the ending myself. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the downtown Hilton, rather than the company conference room neutral territory suggested by Gregory Hutchins. I arrived 30 minutes early, accompanied by Jessica and Thomas, and found the board members already assembling in the hotel's executive conference suite. My father looked haggard, the strain of the past weeks, evident in the new lines around his eyes. My mother sat beside him, ramrod straight her expression, betraying nothing. Amber arrived last, flanked by Adam and a lawyer I recognized from a prominent local firm. She shot me a venomous glare before taking her seat at the opposite end of the table. Gregory Hutchins, serving as acting chair for this meeting, called everyone to order. "We're here to address serious concerns raised about the leadership transition and financial management of Wilson Medical Supply. Miss Samantha Wilson has requested an opportunity to present evidence regarding these matters before the board takes any action." My father immediately objected. "This is a family business matter that should be handled privately. The board has already approved Amber's appointment." "With respect, Mr. Wilson," Gregory countered, "when serious financial improprieties are alleged, the board has a fiduciary responsibility to investigate. Additionally, Ms. Wilson's status as a 25% owner gives her standing to bring these concerns forward." My father looked genuinely startled at the mention of my ownership percentage. He turned to his lawyer, who whispered something in his ear. I began my presentation, methodically starting with documentation of my contributions to the company over 20 years. Performance reviews signed by my father himself, praising my invaluable strategic vision. Financial statements showing the growth during periods when I led key initiatives. Testimonials from major clients attributing their loyalty to my dedicated service. Then I shifted to the evidence of mismanagement, since Amber had taken a more active role. The declining inventory accuracy. The missed shipments to key accounts. The inexplicable consulting fees to Adam's company with no deliverables. "These aren't just operational hiccups," I explained, displaying a graph of declining performance metrics. "They represent a systematic breakdown in the procedures and relationships I spent years building." Throughout my presentation, Amber fidgeted and whispered to her lawyer. My mother stared at her, hands folded in her lap. My father's face grew increasingly flushed. When I finished the first portion of my presentation, Amber stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Sam has always been jealous of me. Now she's fabricating evidence because she can't accept that Mom and Dad chose me to lead the company." "I haven't presented any evidence of financial misconduct yet," I pointed out calmly. "Interesting that you immediately went there." Jessica distributed folders to each board member. The documents in these packets detail numerous concerning financial transactions over the past 3 years. Pay particular attention to the emails. on pages 12 through 17. As the board members reviewed the materials, the color drained from my father's face. These were the emails between Amber and Adam discussing fraudulent invoices and misappropriation of company funds for personal travel. William Foster, who had been waiting outside, was called in to provide his professional assessment as CFO. Based on my review of these transactions, approximately $1.2 million has been improperly directed to entities connected to Miss Amber Wilson and Mr. Adam Peterson over the past 3 years. This represents a significant breach of fiduciary duty. Adam stood up, pointing at William. "You're fired. This is insubordination." "Mr. Peterson has no authority to terminate anyone at this company," I interjected. "And his presence at this meeting represents yet another conflict of interest, given the evidence of his involvement in submitting fraudulent invoices." Gregory asked Adam to leave the meeting. After a brief argument with the board's counsel, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Amber's composure cracked completely. "Everything I did was approved. Dad signed off on all of it. If I'm guilty of something, so is he." She turned to our father, expecting support, but he remained silent, staring at the documented evidence before him. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "We never approved misuse of company funds, Amber. We would never condone that." "Are you serious right now?" Amber's voice rose hysterically. "You approved everything. The consulting fees for Adam's firm, the extra salary accounts, all of it. Don't pretend you didn't know." The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as this family drama unfolded before them. I hadn't expected this public meltdown from Amber, but it confirmed what I'd long suspected: my parents had been willing to bend rules for their favorite daughter while holding me to the highest standards. But even they hadn't realized how far Amber had gone. "The question before this board," I said, redirecting attention to the business matters at hand, "is whether the current leadership transition serves the best interests of Wilson Medical Supply, its employees, its clients, and its shareholders, which include me. The evidence suggests it does not." After 4 hours of presentations and increasingly tense discussion, the board called for a brief recess. When they returned, Gregory announced their decision: Amber would be suspended from all company roles pending a full investigation into the financial improprieties. The CEO transition would be halted immediately. And most surprisingly, they requested that I step in as interim CEO to stabilize operations while the investigation proceeded. My father, looking suddenly older than his 64 years, didn't object. In fact, he didn't speak at all until after the meeting adjourned, when he approached me in the hotel corridor. "I didn't know," he said quietly, "about the misappropriated funds, the fake consulting work. I should have looked more closely at what she was doing." "You should have," I agreed, feeling no triumph in his admission. "You trusted her completely and questioned me at every turn. Why?" He had no answer, at least none he was willing to voice. My mother approached next, tears streaming down her face. "We never meant for things to go this far. We truly thought Amber needed the company more than you did, that you would be fine without it." "That wasn't your decision to make," I replied. "And it was never about who needed it more. It was about who earned it, who built it alongside you for 20 years. As they walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt a complex mixture of vindication, sadness, and exhaustion. The battle wasn't completely over. The investigation would continue, and rebuilding the company would take time. But for the first time since that devastating dinner, I allowed myself to acknowledge a simple truth I had won. Amber had tried to erase me from the company's story. Instead, she had written herself out of its future. The 6 months following the board meeting brought sweeping changes to Wilson Medical Supply and to my life. The regulatory investigation confirmed what our evidence had revealed: systematic financial mismanagement under Amber's brief leadership, including improper use of company funds for personal expenses, and fraudulent consulting contract. Rather than face potential criminal charges, Amber agreed to a settlement that required full restitution of misappropriated funds and her resignation from all company positions. Adams' consulting firm was referred to the district attorney's office for investigation of fraudulent billing practices. My role as interim CEO quickly became permanent when the board unanimously voted to appoint me as the company's official chief executive after just 2 months. Under my leadership, we implemented new financial controls, rebuilt relationships with key clients, and brought back several valuable employees who had left during Amber's tenure. The most difficult reconciliation, however, was with my family. For weeks after the board meeting, my parents avoided direct contact, communicating only through lawyers about company matters. The family dinner table that had been the site of my greatest betrayal remained empty as holidays came and went without gatherings. Then, on a snowy February evening, my father appeared unannounced at my office door. He stood awkwardly in the threshold, looking out of place, despite having occupied this very office for decades. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, his old chair. He sat down heavily. "The company quarterly results are impressive," he began, ever the businessman. "The Medcore expansion particularly." "Thank you." "I didn't come to talk about business," he admitted after an uncomfortable pause. "I came to say I was wrong. About you. About Amber. About everything." The admission I had wanted for so long now felt hollow. Why did you favor her so consistently? All those years, my father stared at his hands. "Your mother and I always saw Amber as fragile, needing more support, more protection. You were so capable, so self-sufficient from such a young age. We thought you'd be fine no matter what. So I was punished for being competent. For not demanding attention, we didn't see it as punishment. We thought we were giving each of you what you needed. Amber needed more guidance, more help. You seemed to thrive with independence. The irony was almost too much. I worked twice as hard, hoping you would notice, hoping you would be proud. Meanwhile, you were teaching Amber that failure would be rewarded and protected." I see that now, he acknowledged, his voice rough with emotion. "I've had a lot of time to think about the kind of father I've been, the kind of business leader. I made fundamental mistakes on both fronts. It wasn't a complete apology, but from my father, a man who had never admitted error in my lifetime, it represented significant progress." 2 weeks later, my mother invited me to lunch. Unlike my father's gruff acknowledgement of mistakes, she arrived with tears already brimming. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she began once we were seated. "But I need you to know how sorry I am." For what specifically, I asked, not to be cruel, but because I needed to hear her acknowledge the actual harm done. "For not seeing you," she said simply. "For allowing your contributions to go unrecognized. For making you feel less valued than your sister. For not protecting you when you deserved protection." We talked for 3 hours that day. She revealed that her own mother had consistently favored her younger sister, the pattern, repeating itself generationally. "I thought I was correcting my mother's mistake by giving extra attention to my firstborn," she explained. "Instead, I just reversed the dynamic." Rebuilding trust with my parents would be a long process. We started with weekly business lunches, strictly focused on company matters. Gradually, we added occasional family dinners, tense at first, then increasingly comfortable as we established new patterns of interaction based on mutual respect rather than old family dynamics. Amber remained the most difficult piece of the family puzzle. After the settlement, she moved to Colorado with Adam, who had avoided prosecution by cooperating with authorities. They married quietly with only my parents attending from our family. For months, I had no direct contact with my sister. Then, on my birthday, an email arrived. "Sam, I don't know where to begin. Sorry doesn't cover the hurt I've caused. I'm working with a therapist to understand why I felt entitled to take what was rightfully yours, why I resented your success even as I benefited from it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I recognize the harm I did. Amber, I didn't respond immediately. The wounds were still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. But the acknowledgement itself represented progress. Within the company, the transition to my leadership brought unexpected benefits. Employees who had worked in fear under Amber's brief reign now operated in an atmosphere of transparency and merit-based recognition. Customer satisfaction scores reached their highest levels in company history. The financial stability I had always prioritized allowed us to weather industry challenges that sank several competitors. 1 year after the fateful family dinner where my parents had announced Amber would inherit everything, we gathered again around that same table. The dynamics had shifted dramatically. My father, now officially retired, deferred to my updates on company performance. My mother, more subdued than in years past, made efforts to ask meaningful questions about my vision for the business. Amber and Adam had returned for a brief visit, their first since moving away. She sat quietly for most of the meal, speaking only when directly addressed. The power imbalance that had defined our relationship since childhood had completely reversed. As dessert was served, my father raised his glass. To Samantha, he said, his voice carrying an emotion I'd rarely heard from him. Wilson Medical Supply thrives under your leadership. Your grandfather would have been proud. The acknowledgement that had once seemed impossible now felt almost ordinary. The validation I had sought for decades had come at tremendous personal cost, fractured family relationships, periods of intense anxiety, and a complete reimagining of who I thought my parents were. Yet, sitting there watching my family adjust to our new reality, I realized something important. The company had never been the true prize. What I had really fought for was recognition of my worth, acknowledgement of my contributions, the simple dignity of being seen. In standing up for myself, I had not only secured my professional legacy, but had also broken a generational pattern of favoritism that might otherwise have continued. That, perhaps more than the company itself, would be my most meaningful inheritance. I now understood that the family dynamics that had shaped my childhood weren't my fault, but healing from them was my responsibility. Not for my parents' sake or even for Amber's, but for my own. Carrying anger and resentment would only continue to give them power over my happiness. The journey toward forgiveness would be long and nonlinear. There would be setbacks and difficult conversations ahead, but for the first time, I could envision a future where my worth wasn't measured against my sisters, where my voice was heard in family discussions, and where the business I had helped build would continue to thrive under my guidance. Sometimes justice comes not in the form we initially imagine, but in the freedom to finally write our own story. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought for what was rightfully yours, or taken the easier path of accepting your family's decision? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who treated you unfairly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories of standing up for yourself. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the family you build through friendship and mutual respect is stronger than the one you're born into.